time has come to reclaim our legacy.
It started as just another crisp London morning outside Buckingham Palace. Cameras clicking, guards standing proud, flags waving softly in the breeze. But then, a voice cut through the calm, loud, mocking, unapologetic. A tourist, wearing a bright political cap and an attitude even louder, decided he was going to teach the British royals a lesson. He thought tradition was weakness. He thought respect was optional. He thought he could treat the RoyalGuard like a prop. He was about to learn, painfully and publicly, how wrong he was. And the moment the guard's eyes shifted, everything changed. Before we dive in, if you love real dramatic royal encounters, emotional life lessons, and stories where pride meets consequences, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next royal deep dive. And hey, drop a comment below. He didn't notice the way London breathed when he arrived. That soft mix of history and hush, the kind that settles in your bones if you let it. No. He came with noise. John Carter, 46, loud-voiced, devoted patriot, defender of everything he believed made his country superior, stepped out of the black taxi like he was stepping onto a stage. His cap sat firm on his head, his sunglasses on even in autumn shade, and his chest was lifted with the pride of a man convinced the world needed to see him. His wife Emily followed quietly behind. Her shoulders curled in a way that hinted she already sensed where this trip was heading. And trailing them, half curious and half embarrassed, were their two teenage sons, Liam and Jack, already exchanging tired looks. They'd seen this version of their father before, loud at airport security, loud at restaurants when service wasn't the American standard, loud whenever anyone dared speak positively about another country. To them, London wasn't the problem. Their father's pride was. But to John, this was a battlefield of ideology, and he had arrived ready to win. "Smells old here," he said, stepping into the bright courtyard just outside Buckingham Palace. He stretched, cracked his neck, looked up at the gold-rimmed palace gates like he was analyzing them for flaws. "So this is where they keep 'em, royals and all," he smirked. "Fancy cages for fancy people." Emily whispered, "Please, let's just enjoy the day, okay?" He didn't answer. He was too busy recording a selfie video. "London check-in. You wouldn't believe the tax waste we were looking at right now. All this marble and gold while regular folks pay the bill. Back home, we take pride in earning our success, not inheriting it." He panned the camera around like a politician at a rally, hoping for agreement. A few tourists pretended not to hear. One or two rolled their eyes. A British couple in their 60s stared like they'd just witnessed someone insult Buckingham Palace itself, which, in a way, he had. Jack tugged his brother's sleeve, mumbling, "Here we go again." Liam just sighed. If arrogance could cause earthquakes, London would have cracked beneath them. The square filled with people, cameras ready, children perched on shoulders, the anticipation of the changing of the guard giving the air a sense of festivity. But where others saw ceremony, John saw outdated pomp. "You know what freedom looks like?" he muttered loudly, just in case anyone wasn't already aware that he had thoughts. "It looks like earning your leadership, voting, hard work, not this." He waved his hand at the palace like brushing away dust. Someone behind him whispered, "Not another one of those loud Americans." Emily's face flushed. But John? That comment fueled him. He planted his boots beside the railing like a man preparing to defend his homeland, even though no one had attacked him. It wasn't anger that churned inside him. Not yet. It was insecurity disguised as patriotism, puffed up into a shield he used in every unfamiliar place. He didn't come here to learn about history. He came to prove something. The first drumbeat of the marching band rolled across the courtyard. The crowd quieted. Flags fluttered. Boots struck pavement in perfect unison, and the guards, tall hats, crimson coats, posture carved from discipline, entered the square. Every movement was sharp, controlled, unshaken by noise or eyes or pressure. And suddenly, very suddenly, it wasn't just tradition in front of them. It was strength. But John didn't see it that way. "Look at 'em," he scoffed, "marching like it's still the 1700s. A father in front of him turned, polite but firm. "They're soldiers. Please show respect." John's eyebrows lifted. Soldiers. The word seemed to offend him, or challenge him, as if someone had just compared their service to his ideal version of military pride. "Where I come from," he boomed, "soldiers fight. They don't dress like theater performers." Emily's breath caught. Jack looked away. Liam whispered, "Dad, stop." But pride is a strange fire. Once lit, it rarely puts itself out. John wasn't just speaking, he was auditioning for his online followers, for strangers who didn't care, for himself.
Because deep down, part of him feared something he could never admit, that maybe other countries had strength too. And if they did, his worldview, his whole identity would shake. So instead, he doubled down. He walked closer, right up to the rope that separated tourists from ceremony, leaned over it like someone checking the quality of a car he didn't believe was worth buying. "Hey!" he shouted toward a guard, a young man with eyes fixed straight ahead, trained to become stone in the face of provocation. "You ever see real military action? Or is standing still part of your training?" The guard didn't blink. Crowd silence thickened. Someone gasped softly. The drum stopped. It was as if the palace itself inhaled. Emily froze. "John, please." He ignored her. Or maybe he couldn't hear her through the roar of his own ego. "Come on. Bet you can't even look at me." Real soldiers look you in the eye. Still no reaction. Only patience. Centuries old, polished, and practiced. And sometimes, patience is scarier than anger. If humiliation was a storm cloud, it was forming gracefully overhead, waiting for just the right thunder strike. What drives a person to pick a fight where one doesn't exist? Fear. Loneliness disguised as confidence. Needing to win a battle no one else is fighting. And in that moment, for all his volume, John looked achingly small. The crowd wasn't angry yet. They were stunned, watching a man fight shadows of his own making. Emily touched his arm softly, almost pleading with her fingertips. "John, you're making yourself a story." But to him, that was victory. Attention, even negative, was fuel. He puffed his chest one more time, oblivious of the tightening shoulders around him, to the guard's subtly shifting stance, not breaking discipline but ready, alert. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was provocation. The kind history never responds kindly to. And then, like an echo before the avalanche, came the moment that would flip everything upside down. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet enough to be dangerous. The guard's jaw tightened. Only a fraction. A tiny signal. But a signal nonetheless. Enough to make Emily's hand fall away. Enough for the teenagers to stop breathing. Enough for every tourist nearby to lean forward. Because when a RoyalGuard, trained to endure pressure beyond ordinary measure, shows even a heartbeat of reaction, it means the line is near. And crossing it, that comes with a price. Crowds don't always shout when things go wrong. Sometimes it goes silent first, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see if dignity will win or foolishness will explode. And here, in the shadow of Buckingham Palace, dignity stood tall in scarlet and bearskin. Foolishness stood in a ball cap, filming himself for strangers online. The guard holds, the tourist pushes. John leaned so close the air between him, and the stoic RoyalGuard practically vibrated. "Come on, man," he sneered, voice booming through the courtyard. "Show some spine. Give me something." Blink. Smirk. Something. Nothing. The guard's gaze stayed fixed beyond him, toward duty, toward history, toward something larger than one man's ego. A boy in the crowd whispered to his sister, "Why is he doing that?" Even children knew better than this. Emily tried again, voice cracking softly. "John, please, enough." But pride has its own momentum. Once rolling downhill, it rarely stops until something breaks. John laughed louder, exaggerating a salute. "Oh, I get it. You gotta play statue because some fancy royals say so?" In my country, we fight for real freedom. A British veteran standing nearby straightened slightly, not aggressively, but with that unmistakable quiet pride only men who have worn a uniform know. He finally spoke, voice steady. Son, that man has fought too. Don't mistake silence for weakness. John didn't even look at him. He just waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, in what war? The Hat Parade of 2019. Gasps rippled. Emily closed her eyes, shame settling over her like winter fog. But what John didn't realize was this. Royal Guards are not props. They are soldiers, trained for discipline, prepared for danger, capable of force if provoked. And he had just taken one step closer. Literally. A line cross, quiet first warning. There are rules here, unwritten but ancient. You do not taunt those who carry rifles in service of their queen, or now, king. You do not lean over the boundary. You do not treat tradition like a toy. But ego, once inflamed, becomes blind. John lifted his phone again, broadcasting to his followers. Watch this. Folks, I'm about to get the royal mannequin to move. A hush swept through the crowd. The guard didn't turn his head, but his voice, deep and trained, suddenly cut the air like a ceremonial blade. Step back, sir. It wasn't loud, wasn't angry, just firm and final. John froze. So did the crowd. Even the pigeons seemed to hold still. Emily's breath hitched, relief mixed with terror. She tugged at his sleeve, whispering, John, please, let's walk away. And for a half second, one pure, unfiltered heartbeat. You could see clarity flash across his face. He could step back. He could save face. He could be a tourist again instead of a ticking embarrassment. Then someone in the crowd muttered, just loud enough, typical loud American. And just like that, clarity shattered. His pride grabbed the wheel again. He leaned even closer to the guard, defiant, reckless. Oh, I get it. You talk now. Where was that voice 5 minutes ago? The guard didn't respond. He had given one warning. Protocol allowed only one. The crowd turns. Murmurs rose. He's going too far. This isn't funny anymore. That poor wife. Someone stop him. A little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. Mom, is that man in trouble? The mother only nodded, eyes tight. Yes, love, he is. Cameras lifted everywhere, not out of delight now, but disbelief. You could almost see headlines forming. John mistook the attention for validation, a fatal mistake. He puffed out his chest again. You feel big in that uniform? Try facing a real fight. Down the line, another guard shifted, the kind of shift that means alert mode, the kind that only trained eyes recognize instantly. A security officer whispered into a mic. Reinforcements moved, subtle as shadows, and Emily finally broke. John, please, I'm begging you. This isn't about pride. This is about respect. You are humiliating yourself. He ignored her, not because he didn't care, but because to admit she was right meant admitting he was wrong. And pride hates surrender more than it loves truth. One touch too far. History has pivot points, moments when a footstep, a breath, a gesture changes everything. This was his. John smirked into the camera, leaning even closer, finger lifting, and he tapped the guard's shoulder. Tiny movement, titanic mistake. The guard moved like precision steel, stepping sharply forward, boots striking pavement with military force. His rifle shifted down, not raised, but positioned in defensive readiness. And his voice, deeper and resonant now, boomed across the courtyard. Do not touch the guard. It echoed off Palace stone. Children startled. Emily gasped. John stepped back instinctively. This wasn't a statue, not a symbol, not a costume. This was a soldier, a trained protector, a man bound by duty older than any modern argument. And in that moment, John finally, painfully understood. He had trespassed more than space. He had trespassed respect. Security responds. Pride begins to crack. Within seconds, 2 palace security officers approached, calm but firm, presence sharp as polished boots. Sir, step back immediately. John's voice, once booming, unstoppable, flickered. I'm just filming. I wasn't. That is enough. One officer said, perfectly even. Move away now. Emily pulled harder now, tears forming. John, please. For the first time, he moved backward voluntarily, not in retreat, but in the collapse of certainty. His son stared at him, not embarrassed, but hurt. And suddenly, the phones around him, the murmurs, the stares. It all hit. Not applause, not admiration, not patriotism, just judgment and shame, deep, burning shame. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. Sometimes the loudest men fall the hardest into silence. End of chapter 2. Slow humiliation, pride bending, consequences circling. He hasn't paid the price yet, but the fall has begun. There are moments in life when the world stops waiting for pride to catch up. Moments when reality steps forward, clears its throat, and says, for John Carter, this was that moment. He stood frozen in front of Buckingham Palace. Not a hero, not a patriot, not a man showing strength, but tourists who had crossed a line he didn't even understand. Security closed in like silent chess pieces, controlled, precise, inevitable. A voice, calm but firm, cut through the air behind him. Sir, put your phone down and step back. John stammered, I didn't mean... But intention doesn't erase action, and ego doesn't rewind time. He lowered his phone slowly, like surrendering a flag he never truly commanded. Emily grabbed his hand with trembling fingers. Just listen, please. Her voice was small, not weak, but wounded. A woman tired of apologizing for a man who didn't know how to apologize for himself. Tourists whispered from every direction. Serves him right. So disrespectful, embarrassing, horrible example to his kids. One American couple shook their heads, whispering, he's making all of us look bad. A teenage boy filmed, narrating in awe. This dude really messed around and found out. And his sons, poor Liam and Jack, stood behind him stiff as statues, eyes shining with humiliation they hadn't earned. John had always believed he protected his family's pride. But today, he was the reason their heads hung. Pain hits differently when you realize you didn't just hurt yourself. You became someone your children don't want to be. Through it all, the Royal Guard returned to position, jaw set, gaze forward, heartbeat steady. Not triumphant, not gloating, simply professional. That was perhaps the most crushing blow to John's pride. He had tried to provoke a fight. He hadn't earned even anger. The guard's discipline became a mirror, reflecting just how undisciplined John had been. And mirrors can be cruel teachers. Sir, a senior security officer said, stepping forward, you will come with us. It wasn't a question. And John, who had spoken like he commanded empires, suddenly could only whisper, okay. His voice cracked. The same voice that had boomed proudly only minutes earlier now sounded small, a balloon punctured by reality. Emily squeezed his hand. His son stayed behind, guided by another officer to wait with the crowd. He wasn't being dragged, but he wasn't walking freely either. This was escort, not guidance. And as they moved away, people parted without a word, not out of fear, but out of quiet verdict. He wasn't dangerous. He was dishonored. Sometimes that's worse. Past iron gates, past cameras still recording, past murmurs that stung more than any weapon could. Someone yelled, learn some respect. But the worst attack was silence. Silence follows humiliation like a faithful shadow. By the time the palace doors closed behind him, John looked hollow, like a man who had finally realized he wasn't fighting the world. He was fighting himself, and losing. Inside the quiet room, they seated him in a plain room. White walls, wooden table, a small UK flag in the corner. 2 officers sat across from him. One began measured and clear. You interfered with military personnel performing ceremonial duty. You ignored warnings. You made physical contact. This is a violation of British law. John swallowed hard, throat tight, palms sweating. This is a misunderstanding, he muttered. I'm just proud of my country. The officer didn't blink. Sir, pride is not the issue. Conduct is. It hit him like cold water poured down his spine. He had always believed pride justified behavior. Here, it didn't even excuse it. He exhaled, sound shaky, shoulders dropping as if gravity finally remembered him. I messed up, he whispered. Emily, sitting beside him, didn't speak, but her silent exhale felt like a prayer in the middle of a storm. Consequences unfold. They took statements. Not hostile, just formal, methodical, inevitable. At minimum, fines, mandatory apology, and a record of incident, the officer explained. If legal action proceeds, potential arrest and ban from re-entry. John's stomach twisted. He had come here ready to brag online. Now he was one breath away from being the punchline of international headlines. The worst part? He deserved it. And for the first time in a long, long while, he knew it. Breaking point. When the officer stepped out, Emily turned to him. 16 years of shared life behind her eyes. Vacations, holidays, fights, dreams, and disappointment, layered, old, familiar. Why? She whispered. Her voice wasn't angry. It was hurting. Why did you need to prove anything to anyone? John looked at his hands. Big hands that once built things, fixed things, held his sons when they were babies. Yet here they had only damaged. I don't know, he said honestly. And honesty, however late, has a strange power. His voice cracked. I thought being loud meant being strong. Emily shook her head gently. Real strength, she whispered, is knowing when to be quiet. He felt tears build, burning, ashamed tears. In that moment, for the first time in years, John Carter wasn't performing. He was breaking. And breaking is often the first step toward rebuilding. Release, but not free. Eventually, they escorted him out, not as a criminal, but as a man under scrutiny. He didn't stride. He didn't lecture or film or perform. He just walked. And outside, the world greeted him with flashing cameras, curious eyes, and the weight of public judgment. When his sons saw him, their faces weren't angry. They were relieved. Because when a man falls, sometimes the greatest fear isn't the fall itself, but whether he'll get up different or get up the same. John didn't speak. He just hugged them, tight, desperate, humbled. And Jack whispered, voice barely audible, Dad, let's go home. John nodded. Yeah, let's go. Not victorious, but beginning to understand. Because sometimes the price of disrespect isn't fines or trouble. It's realizing the world doesn't owe you admiration. You have to earn it. And today he had earned something else. A second chance, if he chose to use it. Back in the hotel room, London felt different. Not majestic. Not magical. Just heavy. Emily unpacked in silence. The boys scrolled their phones quietly, watching clips of their father that strangers were laughing at online. John sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, head in hands. He had always imagined himself as a strong man, someone who stood tall for his beliefs. But strength without humility is just noise in a quiet world. And today, he had been pure noise. A knock on the door interrupted the silence. A polite embassy staffer stood there, folder in hand. Mr. Carter, the officers have recommended a restorative program instead of prosecution. A chance to make amends. A chance, not a guarantee. The man held out papers. Veteran community service, educational sessions, and a meeting with the guard you confronted if he agrees. John exhaled, slow, trembling. I'll do it, he said. The words didn't sound like surrender. They sounded like relief. 2 days later, he walked into a modest London community center. Not royal, not touristy, just ordinary brick walls and honest air. Inside, a group of veterans sat, old medals, weather hands, calm eyes that had seen things bigger than arguments at palaces. One man came beside him, nodded in greeting. You the loud American? John swallowed. Yes, sir. The man smiled faintly. Good. Loud voices sometimes hide good hearts. Let's see which one you've got. No lecture. No anger. Just a challenge from someone who'd earned the right to challenge him. They began speaking. Stories of service, loss, brotherhood, pride. Wars John had only ever debated from behind a screen. Sacrifice he had mistaken for ceremony, and as he listened, his world shifted, brick by brick. This wasn't about monarchy versus democracy, not about politics or pride. It was about honor, a universal language he had forgotten how to speak. The face he feared. A week into the program, he entered a small meeting room. A man in simple civilian clothes sat at the table. Young, composed, shoulders squared not by pride, but by discipline. No uniform now, no rifle, just a man and the weight of what John had done. John inhaled, shaky. I'm sorry. Truly, I embarrassed my family, my country, myself, and I disrespected you. I didn't understand your duty. James studied him quietly. Then, do you understand it now? Yes, John answered softly. Duty isn't about costumes. It's about carrying something bigger than yourself. You stood for honor. I stood for my ego. Silence, but not hostile. James finally nodded. I appreciate your apology. Most people never learn the difference. Relief washed over John so fast he nearly sagged. But James leaned forward, firm, not unkind. Respect is not surrender. It's discipline. Strength without respect is just aggression dressed as patriotism. John closed his eyes, those words landing deep, rebuilding one humble step at a time. Over days, John worked, packing care boxes for military families, setting chairs for veteran meetings, listening, truly listening to stories of service and sacrifice, cleaning floors and washing dishes without complaint. For a man who once demanded attention, invisibility became healing. His sons joined on his last weekend, helping quietly, listening too. And slowly, John felt something return, not swagger, but dignity. Because humility does not erase strength. It purifies it. The return to the palace. On the final day, the veterans invited him to walk with them to Buckingham Palace. Not as a tourist, not as a critic, but as someone who had finally learned what tradition protects. The memory of sacrifice. They stood quietly among tourists. John watched the changing of the guard in silence, heart steady, breath calm. The precision no longer looked silly. It looked sacred. When the patrol passed, John stepped forward just enough, not to intrude, just to be seen. He offered a small nod, deliberate, humbled, respectful. One guard gave the faintest nod back, barely there, but real, and John felt it like a blessing. At Heathrow Airport, nobody was filming him. Nobody recognized him. No dramatic exit. Just a man boarding a plane with a different heart than he arrived with. Emily squeezed his hand. I'm proud of the man who's coming home. He swallowed hard, because praise feels heavier when you've earned it the hard way. Jack nudged him jokingly. Try not to cause diplomatic incidents in U.S. airports. John chuckled. A real, soft laugh, not performative. I think I retired from international drama. The plane lifted, and with it, so did something heavy that had sat inside him for years. Back home, a different legacy. In Texas, friends expected bravado. So, did you tell those royals how it's done? But instead, he answered quietly, No, I learned how it's done, and it changed me. He started volunteering at the local veteran center, spoke at schools about respecting other cultures, taught his boys that pride isn't loud, character is, and every so often, when people mock traditions or uniforms, he simply said, One day, I disrespected a soldier who deserved honor. I won't make that mistake again. In his workshop sat a framed photo, not of the palace, not of guards, but veterans at the London Community Center. And next to it, a small slip of paper from James, the guard. Strength needs silence. Honor needs humility. Thank you for learning both. John would stand before it sometimes, breathing deeply grateful. He didn't return home a hero. He returned something better. A man who finally understood what strength really looks like. And sometimes, the greatest victory is learning you don't always have to win.